Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Kumaramangalam, in this conversation. I hope you're doing well and keeping
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Doing the best I can to be safe.
Yeah. So I've been seeing, a couple of videos that you've been putting out about students, and the NEET and the GE exam and so on, and how you think it should be postponed and all that, and which a lot of people in the country have been voicing out. But before that, I want to ask a couple of things about your political party and, Congress, of which you're a member of, and also the president of the professionals chapter, right? Tamil Nadu. So coming firstly to the Indian National Congress and what has been happening in recent times, how relevant do you think the Indian National Congress is in today's politics?
Well, I think it continues to be the primary opposition party, the only national opposition party we have. And if you look at our vote share in the last election, as a single large unit, I think nobody achieved the number of votes that we did. And we have a pretty high bar, sort of platform to build on top of. And the values that the Indian National Congress espouses, what we stand for, I think are even more relevant in today's time, when you can see an attack on most of the institutions that are the pillars of our democracy. So I think what we stand for is more relevant today than it was maybe even a decade ago.
Right. But while the Congress has produced some fantastic leaders and prime ministers for the country, right now within the Congress, there seems to be, a debate as to who should be the leader of the party itself. So given that there's so much of discussion around that and so much of confusion supposedly around that, how do you think they're going to compete, in the elections which are upcoming in so many states and which are very important for the country as well?
Sure, but I think we have to put this in sort of a historical context, because this has always happened in the Congress party. Even when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister, the party split in two. There was a challenge to her leadership. Even when Mrs. Sonia Gandhi lost in '98, there was a challenge to her leadership, and the party split, and a few people left the party as well. So this has been there for time immemorial. The Congress is a fairly democratic party, much to despite what other people say. And often our discussions and debates spill out into the open and are sort of fodder for a lot of people to point fingers at us and say that we aren't clear about our leadership. But let's be honest, the letter that the 23 have signed, and that is now, even I think the text of the letter came out a few days ago. I firmly believe that if there was an election held tomorrow to the post of the Congress president, most of our cadre, most of our AICC representatives or our PCC representatives will end up voting for Rahul Gandhi as the next president. Our problem today, really, frankly, is that he doesn't seem to be wanting to come back as of now. But all of us want him to take the lead. So maybe there you could say some sort of confusion. But in terms of questioning the leadership and having a discussion and debating issues, that's always been, the style of the Congress party.
Right. But, as far as Rahul Gandhi is concerned, the country, or at least, a lot of opinions that you see on social media and so on and so forth, even in the media sometimes, the op-eds which are written, they don't seem to find him a strong leader, as capable of leading leading any party, because because of the kind of opinions he has, because he's not vociferous enough, because he doesn't take a hard stand. There are a lot of
I'm smiling. I'm smiling because I don't think anyone is opposed BJP and the current Prime Minister as vociferously as Rahul Gandhi has. In fact, there are many within our party who believe that he shouldn't do so. So your saying this actually makes me smile a bit, because a lot of people within the party feel that he shouldn't be opposing the current Prime Minister as strongly as he does. So I don't think that's a problem. I think, there's this old adage that nothing succeeds like success. And he hasn't had his fair share of successes in the recent past. So it turns out to be a bit of a soft target. There's also, I think, now common knowledge, even, given the articles that have come out on how Facebook has been able to be manipulated and other social media platforms are open to influence, that there has been a concerted campaign to sort of damage his reputation, if you will, and make him come across looking as weak and inept, where it's quite the opposite. I mean, if you sit in with a private conversation with him, you'll find out that he's someone who's a an avid reader and someone who has strong opinions about where this country should, the direction this country should go in. And he was, to give him credit, I mean, back in February when he came out and said that everyone should be worried in COVID, even I didn't know what he was talking about. At that point, it wasn't even an issue to be spoken about. And today we're 6 months down with, an economy in tatters and with no insight into when we're going to turn the corner on this thing. And he was the first person to warn the country about it. So nobody seems to want to give him credit for that, which is unfortunate. But I think it goes to the fact that both social media and media, all media in fact today, seems to be a little lopsided.
Okay. So coming specific to Tamil Nadu, where 2021 elections are coming up. It's always seen as a DMK-ADMK fight. And I think even in 2021, that's how it's being projected. What is the Congress's stand here? How does it seem? Because the DMK has always had an alliance with the Congress, but even that seems to be very dicey right now.
Yeah, do you believe it's dicey? I don't see it as being very dicey.
They've had issues recently.
I sort of see it as being in the bag. I'm surprised you say that. Well, no, I know. See, again, there are rumors that have been going around that saying that the DMK will drop us, or the DMK and the Congress alliance will break. But like you rightly pointed out, it's not forever per se. But we came together in 2004, which is 16 years ago, and we've been together through the ups and downs since then. And I think we found common cause in a number of issues. We do diverge on some issues. We're not exactly the same party, if you will, but we have found common cause in enough issues that we are together facing the election in 2021. In fact, when we faced the election together in 2019, our leader Rahul Gandhi came out and openly declared at that point that Stalin or Mr. Stalin was going to be the next chief minister candidate from our side, and we're continuing that promise. Just as he was the first one in the country to propose Shri Rahul Gandhi's name as the prime minister of the country at that point. So the relationship has been around since 2004, and it has grown stronger. We've had ups and downs. We parted ways in 2014, but I think at this point we've come together on enough issues that I don't see us parting ways for 2021.
Okay. So, speaking specifically about Tamil Nadu, there has been a perception now, change in perception, if you will, that when Eddapadi Palaniswamy came in as the chief minister, people weren't very confident, about him or about the party. But the tenure has been held for 5 years. And people are seeing ADMK as, proving itself without the leadership of Amma, Dr. Latha. So it's seen as 2021 is seen as going to be a very tough battle between the ADMK and DMK. What is your perception?
My perception is quite the opposite. So as you rightly pointed out in the beginning of this session that Tamil Nadu has always moved from one party to another. Only twice they repeated, and once MGR passed away, and then Miss Jayalalitha passed away last time. Yeah. I think the feedback that I get from the ground and the sort of perception that I see building up is that this is not going to be a contest at all. I mean, I see it as quite the opposite. I think it's going to be a sweep, and that's on the one hand you have 10 years of anti-incumbency. And you also have added to that, the ADMK has not announced Eddapadi Palaniswamy as a chief ministerial candidate, and that debate has come out in the open. I frankly don't think it can be any more insulting to Eddapadi Palaniswamy that his own party, while he's sitting chief minister, is refusing to declare him as the candidate for that position going into 2021. So if his own party is not willing to bat for him, I can't see how the public would be able to, would be willing to put their faith in him. And the third thing is that in terms of his performance, I think if you count staying in government as performance, yes, he's performed. But anything outside of that, I would, disagree with. His biggest problem, frankly, has been that he's been operating in the shadow of the BJP. So it isn't, it has never come across as ADMK being a government independent of the central government. Have they actually batted strongly enough for causes that matter to Tamil Nadu with the central government? No, absolutely not. They've taken the pittance that were thrown at them and gone back and sort of saying paeans of them. But sometimes now in some places, for example, when water has gone above the head, as in the case with the amount of GST cess, dues that I owe to Tamil Nadu, Mr. Palisamy has written a strong letter. But I don't think that counts for anything. I think the BJP has made a severe attack on the federal structure of our country, and his responses have been honestly tepid in comparison to what he's faced from the BJP party in Tamil Nadu, which have come across and said a number of things about ADMK that I think if Amma was around, she would never have tolerated it for even a second. So he comes across to me as, a well-meaning chap, no doubt, but someone who's not been able to operate independent of this pressure that the BJP has placed on him. And why he's under that pressure is anyone's guess.
Okay. But, your alliance partner, the DMK, has also been having its fair share of issues because the party seems to, there are so many news stories which have been out in recent times, how the old-timers in the party are not happy with Mr. Udayanizi's, rise within the ranks and the kind of power he wields today. So there seems to be a lot of, unhappiness right now, at least, within the DMK as well. Isn't that going to affect the party?
I don't think it'll affect the party to that much of an extent. Even when Mr. Stalin was taking over the reins, and this happened over a much longer period, let's say about maybe 7 or 8 years, when he faced opposition from his own brother, and when in every district there were strong men who basically opposed his entry in some places, he was able to overcome that, and now he has the party completely united behind him. I think Udayanidi's entrance actually benefits DMK to a large extent, because from someone like me who's seen DMK's organization on the ground, they have the problem that any grand old party would have, which is they have an aging cadre and they have leaders who've been sort of holding incumbency in a particular position for decades. So what Udayanidhi is doing is he's trying to, sort of infuse fresh blood into the organization, and it's something that's required and would not happen unless it's, pushed from the top down. Would that cause a sort of disturbance? It would. I'm not denying that there wouldn't be disturbance. Any change causes sort of churn. But I think it is for the betterment of DMK more than to their detriment.
Right. But they also have got roped in Prashant Kishore to help them, right? Now, does it show that the DMK is in the back footing?
No, not really. This has now become part of the fair for elections. I mean, Nitish started with Prashant Kishore. Modi also had Prashant Kishore. We too had Prashant Kishore in the UP elections. Now, Prashant Kishore is sort of the biggest brand name in this game, but there are many people sort of in this game now. And in 19, when I was thinking about contesting parliament, I too actually hired a person. And I found it extremely valuable. So, there is a reason why big corporations and companies hire consultants like McKinsey or BCG to have an outsider's perspective, a fresh set of eyes, dispassionately looking at your problems and analyzing where the gaps are and what the possible solutions could be is always useful. And especially in large organizations, very, very useful. So I think Prashant Kishore will definitely add value in that sense. And you've got to remember that in any large organization, you have like empires, you have vested interests, you have, people who are married to the status quo. And unlike the leader, whose only interest would be in actually winning, it's not clear that everybody would share that common goal and that common interest or that common vision. So having someone who's sort of the consultant to the CEO of the company here, Prashant Kishore to Mr. Stalin, would actually help give him an objective assessment of where to do what in order to achieve victory. So I think it's a big plus.
Okay. One of the recent controversies has been about, this worship, Hinduism, worshipping gods. We saw the Tirupur Kutram Murugan issue. Then Udayanidhi tweeted a picture of Ganesha and that became a big issue. Okay, now there's also a lot of anti-Brahmin sentiment, an anti-Hindu sentiment which seems to have suddenly erupted. This was never the case earlier in Tamil Nadu. I, at least having lived here for the last 10 odd years, I've never seen, such a big controversy rising over gods per se, and, who's worshipping whom and which section of society. So isn't this sentiment, this whole issue people are now trying to sway the Hindus. Is that what it's come down to? Is it like similar to what the BJP is doing?
It's sad. I mean, see, I'll tell you in a larger sense. The Brahmanism or the anti-Brahmanism, that sort of arrived in, or that arose in Periyar's time. Every era requires a different type of politics, or every era
Right.
requires the society to change in some particular way or form. I think Brahmins today in Tamil Nadu are a very small minority. They're not even 3% of the population.
Right.
So, frankly, sometimes politically it seems easy to attack them. It benefits us. But I think the DMK themselves, through leaders, eloquent leaders such as A. Raja, have openly said that when they talk about Brahmanism or the Brahmanical hierarchy, it refers to the hierarchy in the Hindu caste structure, where you sort of believe that you're superior by birth because you're in one part of that hierarchy over everybody who's below you, and that is what everyone is against, and that is more progressive in a modern thought than saying that says anti-Brahmanism or there's some, the DMK or all of us are against a particular community. That's not the case at all. So what Brahmanism means was defined very well by them in the recent past, reinforced, I would say.
Right.
The other thing is Kandashasti Kavasam and Karapar Kutam is an unnecessary distraction from the real issues that are plaguing Tamil Nadu right now. And it is an unfortunate byproduct of this era of politics, I would say, where it is the politics of identity that has overtaken the politics of ideas. We seem to be bereft of new ideas to push the limits of our healthcare, push the limits on education, create employment. Instead of discussing and debating different models of that, we seem to be discussing and debating whether someone prays to God or not. How is that relevant? It is relevant only in the sense that it's so much easier in politics to divide people based on their identity, which is frankly is nothing but an accident of birth. Whether anyone's Hindu or Muslim, 99 times out of 100 is just not what they've consciously chosen, but just something that they're born into. And to say that that's how you can divide them and then get them to vote on that has become part of the course now. It's become part of the course everywhere. It's unfortunate and it's sad that Tamil Nadu, which is the most industrialized state in the country, and at the same time is one of the most vociferous voices of opposition against attacks on the environment, like the new EIA 2020, is debating about issues like this. And this is squarely because of the BJP, because this benefits them. They do this everywhere. They did this in Gujarat, they did this in West Bengal, and to their credit, they're extremely good at it, and they've always had electoral gains because of it. But I think they won't have any here. I think Tamil Nadu is fundamentally different, and I think that's, again, not because of ideas, but because the Tamil identity reigns supreme over every other form of identity that you could possibly place upon us. Tamil as an identity, a language, a culture, it rises above all of these other divisions. And therefore, it's very hard for BJP to try and create a rift they have, the way they have in other places, where maybe the religious identity actually overcomes the other forms.
Okay. So what about you now? Are you planning to stand for the 2021 elections? Are you looking at contesting?
So I mean, I'll be completely honest. I was planning to stand for the 2019 elections, but I didn't get an opportunity because my seat went away in the alliance. And so now I've decided not to have plans as such and let my party decide when it is that they believe I should stand for what election. So as a working president, I'm in charge of, earlier, before I was working president, I was only working in my own constituency of Salem, which actually is coincidentally is where the chief minister is from as well.
Right.
But now I'm in charge of districts across the Western Belt. And so of those 13 districts, I have a larger responsibility to go and work and ensure that whoever contests there, from our party at least, and from our alliance actually wins. So I'm not entirely sure if the party would decide that I should also be contesting, but I leave that to to the powers that be to make up their mind.
So what are some of the key issues right now which you think government of India should focus on? I mean, other than the economy, and the economy is a much larger issue, but a few key things that we should get working on right now.
I mean, you said the economy is a much larger issue, but frankly, that is the issue.
Right?
We can't sort of sweep it under the carpet. But I'll say, in
given
terms
the
of
COVID,
right?
I'm talking about given the COVID pandemic.
Let's talk about COVID, right? COVID is we're in this interesting situation where our cases are going up every day. But at the same time, we know that we can't stay closed in. And so we're opening up and providing relaxations every day. I believe this month we'll see another new spike in COVID because borders have opened up everywhere and relaxations have been, different sorts of relaxations have been provided.
Right.
I think at this point, our focus really has to be twofold. One, or actually I would say threefold. One, we need to be a lot more transparent with the data that we're getting from states about COVID in terms of mortality rate based on age, in terms of mortality rate based on region, districts, right? Even the tests right now aren't being divided out. So what I mean by that is you had the original virus test called the RT-PCR test. You have an antibody test, and you also have an antigen test.
Right.
Now the antigen test is actually the least accurate of the lot. And now when tests are being reporting, barring a few states, many people are just bunching all of these up together and reporting them as one. So it doesn't really give us much insight into how this disease is moving also, because we don't know about the accuracy of the data we're getting. The second is we need to come out clearly, and this only the Prime Minister has to do. It can't be state chief ministers. The Prime Minister has to come out clearly and bust all the myths that are going around about COVID. You know, as people are of the age of 25, 28 are dying, you heard stories every day. You hear about new mediums and new ways in which this virus can travel. There is genuine fear-mongering happening today, everywhere. And there needs to be clearly, and I mean, I don't blame people also, because the truth about this virus has changed so many times.
Right.
That whether you're a virologist or an epidemiologist or a doctor, you've lost sort of all authority now with the common man. Because this has been such an unknown thing that you've had to change your stance so many times that people now aren't sure whether to believe and what to believe. So someone of requisite authority, and I think in this case has to be the Prime Minister, has to come out and say, this is what it is, this is how COVID is going to work, this will help, this won't help, and this is how you have to take precautions. You know, it has to be crystal clear, because there is a lot of stories going around and there's nobody of sufficient authority providing clarity.
Okay.
And the third thing is we need to start now, and we need to outline what our vaccine policy is going to be. And I say this because I'm extremely scared when I look at the US and Europe pre-purchasing their vaccines, paying billions of dollars to companies across the world. I mean, it almost looks to me like they're going to corner almost the entire market on vaccines before a single vaccine comes to India. That really makes me scared, because I know we're not doing anything of that sort in this country. And does that mean that we'll be the last in line to get the vaccine? How exactly is this going to work? And once we get the vaccine, once we're through the country competition, the next step is who gets the vaccine first in the country. I mean, who gets first, second, third? Is it going to be based on who goes out more often, which means like the poorest should get it before we do?
Right.
Because they actually have to get out of their house and travel and meet more people. Well, what is the protocol?
Right.
That has to be specified now. And keeping people in the dark till the end is not going to be advisable.
Right.
So these are the things that we need to do in COVID on an urgent basis.
Right. Now, what about education, schools and colleges and so on and so forth?
I think a lot of people have shifted to online education. Now there is that question of equality there, equality of access. That is, there's most people actually who won't have access to it, and I think we should work on enabling that access for now. I think as long as parents are not comfortable sending their children to school, we cannot force them to do so. Right. It's a very private choice. And I think we need to be able to show that we need to make sure, and this is the state government's job as much as the central's, is that we provide access. I mean, we've had e-education, so to speak, for ages, but it's never received the kind of fillip it has till right now. And I know there are technologies available in the market that it can be provided on a mass access basis. And now, especially with smartphones pretty much in everybody's hand.
Right.
So this is something that we really need to take a closer look at and enable it as soon as possible, because I think schools largely might not happen till end of the year, given the trajectory that we're headed on.
Right. Now, speaking about Chennai specifically, the number of COVID cases which are, positive are at least around 1,200 roughly every day, that the state government keeps putting out press releases on. Has the state government done enough? Because now we've opened up public transport, we've opened up the malls, only cinema theaters are no longer open, but TASMAC, everything is open, right? Hotels are open. So given that, we're opening up everything, And given that the number of COVID cases is still in Chennai alone is still above 1,000, how do you think the state government should manage this? Are they doing enough? Are they doing the right things?
I think at some point you have to, take a step back and say that in this whole lives versus livelihoods debate, we have crossed a point where we cannot stay closed anymore. So as much as the cases are going to keep rising, like I said, the government needs to come out and provide clarity on, one, what the protocol of treatment would be, and two, on what exists right now. Who are the people who actually have to be extremely cautious and make sure that don't expose themselves to the virus. There is really no other way. So this is now we sort of caught the tail of the tiger, and we can't let it go. And now it's about making sure we get the vaccine as soon as possible, and everyone stays as cautious as possible when they go out and travel. So obviously those who can get away with doing their jobs without leaving their houses would continue to do so, even if the government tells them not to, or that they can travel rather, up till the end of the year.
Right.
There is really no way out at this point.
Okay. Even in terms of the economy, do you think, I'm talking specifically about Tamil Nadu, because we live here and we need to look at what's happening around us, right? Do you think the state government is doing enough to help, push economic, or industry, do more for the upliftment in that sector?
So there's very little in the state government's hands at this point, actually. So one thing they could provide is certainty, which is, they opened up and they closed down Chennai again, right? We have immigrants that left Chennai, went back to their hometown, getting those people back. And, for an entrepreneur to go ahead and start investing, start opening up production again, he needs a level of certainty that there will not be a lockdown again. Right. He won't be asked to stop again. Right. The other thing is, as much as it scares people, unless you start public transport, you can't actually get back to work in the factories. Right. That's a big minus. So I think they have to look at safe ways to actually start public transport again, whether that is actually disinfecting 2 or 3 times a day, setting up spots for that. They're already doing disinfection in, outer areas, but inside the bus, there are now chemicals available I'm aware of that would actually provide a nano coating on the surfaces of the buses, that even if they come in contact with the COVID virus, they will eliminate the virus. That coating would. People, then you have to figure out social distancing with the seats and all, but if you don't open up public transport, getting back to work is going to be very hard. So maybe that's what the government can do. In terms of providing taxation exemptions and everything, that is pretty much entirely in the central government's hands at this point. Right. I would, as an opposition, blame the state government for raising taxes on petrol, right? And for opening up the Tasmac shops as soon as they did, because they could also turn into hotspots of corona. But they have no choice. Right. There's absolutely no money coming from there, and there's only so much they can borrow. Yeah. They have to be people who are willing to subscribe to that debt, which is also missing today. So we're in a very bad situation. Every state in this country, I think, is in a horrible situation because of the way the central government is actually treating them.
Now, given the COVID pandemic, how do you think the elections are going to be conducted? I mean, you can't campaign. You can't campaign at this point, right? At least in the end of the year, nothing is going to happen. So,
I think nothing will happen to the end of the year in Tamil Nadu. I think let's see how Bihar elections are conducted in November. That will sort of be a template to see how elections are conducted.
And I think Bihar is a bad example to kind of,
and the floods, right? Yeah. No, I mean, in the sense that if you can conduct an election in Bihar, where internet penetration, urbanization, all these things are far lower than Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, a lot of campaigning can happen on social media and media itself. I mean, our levels of internet penetration, cell phone penetration, television penetration are far higher through the roof compared to these places. So I can imagine, okay, maybe Tamil Nadu, that's how we'll conduct the campaign. Come March, April, we'll be out of this thing and people can come out and vote safely. We don't have to obsess about e-voting or something of the sort. Bihar is going to be extremely interesting because they have none of these things. Right. And we're still in this pandemic, so I wouldn't be surprised if they change their mind and postpone the election at this point. But it seems like they're going ahead. So if they can conduct an election, I'm pretty sure Tamil Nadu can easily conduct an election. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, okay. And finally, my last question to you would be, do you think Rajinikanth is going to come into politics ever?
Sorry, but this is an age-old question, the $1 million question, if you will.
No, but the Rajini Makkal Mandram was started eventually. So at least, that took off after all these years. But do you think...
I mean, without going into hearsay, because
Right.
there's enough of that, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go into the last press conference he gave. His last press meet left me thoroughly confused. I did not understand if he was coming or going or what was he doing, because he said, do you think I'm a fool to come in this situation? Then all of you have to come, then I will come. So, I mean, I don't think he's going to come.
Okay.
Because he's expecting to be a revolutionary without leading the revolution.
Okay.
It's just not possible. He wants, he wants everything to be ready before he steps in. I think he's been wanting to step in for a while, but he was wary of having two behemoths in politics and having to compete with them. Now they don't exist, but you have someone who's, equally prominent, Mr. M.K. Stalin, who's been around in politics for ages itself. Now, no matter what the BJP or other people say, he has established himself as a real politician. He's not just a descendant, right? So I think Rajinikanth might be having second thoughts again. Frankly, at his age and with his, the name that he enjoys with the people of Tamil Nadu, I'm much younger than him to even think about advising him, but I would say he shouldn't come and try and spoil it. I mean, forget Rajinikanth. Let's talk about Kamal Haasan for a second. Kamal Haasan made a pretty good debut, I would say, in Parliament. There were some pockets he showed some real influence. But he started what Name Tir Sudore, he started a campaign, right?
Yeah.
I saw an ad the other day on his Twitter handle where he said Name Tir and then he pointed to Big Boss. I mean, are you an actor or are you a politician aiming to come into government? You cannot be both at this point in time. We are 8 months away from the assembly elections. You have to pick up people's issues, and whether COVID or non-COVID, whenever you can get on the ground to support the people, you can't go back to being a television star again. So I think Mr. Kamal Haasan also, to me, it seems at least is losing steam already.
So you guys, the Congress or you, and the DMK is confident that Rajinikanth won't come into politics. But the fact is that if he ever does, right, he is going to take away a lot of the votes. And those votes that he's taking away are going to be from the ADMK and the DMK, isn't it?
I mean, it's anyone's guess whose votes he takes away. But my guess would be that he wouldn't be that much of a factor. All these things, they take time and momentum. It's not even as if Rajinikanth as a superstar is at his peak right now, and every movie he comes out with is, a roaring success. I think we can safely say that even on a cinema, on the basis of being a cinema star, his appeal has somewhat diminished. And it's hard for me to say this because he's a childhood hero of mine as well. I grew up watching his movies.
Okay.
But I don't think he'll have the kind of impact some people think he has. I think it'll be very diminished.
Okay. And finally, 2021 elections, who do you think is going to form the government in Tamil Nadu post the elections?
But I think going by what I've said so far, it's obvious it's going to be DMK, Congress and allies who form the government.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be easily a majority government. I mean, I don't think there'll be a question also.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Kumaramangalam, for the interesting conversation and the insight. So let's see what happens in 2021. We'll just have to wait and watch and see how true your words are. So wishing you the best, and in case you do get to stand for the elections and for a seat, so wishing you the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks.